Caught my girlfriend turning off her location to cheat with a guy, got told it was rape, but I can't trust her. My girlfriend, explicitly because I was spending my weekend with family who had flown in from out of state/country, decided to go out. She spent however much of the day at the mall with some guy she said she just wanted to be friends with. He took her back to his place where there was apparently a party. She turned off her location. I noticed when I went to send her a goodnight message and asked her if everything was okay and if she was safe. She affectionately said she was. I asked her if her home Wi-Fi was down again. She told me she had turned it off so her parents wouldn't know where she was. I asked her where she was and she never answered me. From the bits she's told me, the music was loud. He told her he wanted to show her his room because of how hilariously tiny it was. She went up with him, and he started going after her sexually. She said it was late and her parents were worried about her and she wanted to go home, but from what I understand he pressured her into saying yes. That's cohesion and rape. I got a message that morning telling me she had cheated but her friends told her it was rape. I messaged her, drew her hugging geese, told her I wanted to make sure she was okay and call. I offered to drive over. She told me she was with her good friend, different guy obviously, and spending the day with him. I kept messaging, worried about her, to no response, until I stopped to not pressure her. I barely got through work that day, and got myself drunk, first time properly sloshed, that night to stop worrying when trying to be with family I only had a day with between months or years. She called me when I was drunk and asked me to come over, offered to Uber me over, told me she needed me. I told her I was drunk and couldn't be there. I had also promised my family members not to talk to her if they let me at the hard whiskey. She called me and I was apparently asking too many questions and told me to just spend the next day with family. The next day while I was with family, she begged me to come over. By that point I was already talking to family, including my sister, who was abused, including raped by her ex, trying to understand. They all told me she breached my trust. In all fairness, they're biased because they feel she's abusive. In a previous IDA post, all responses told me I was being abused, if they believed the story at all. I broke up with her then, but she told me she needed me to sit next to her that night or she wouldn't be able to finish her take-home midterm. She aced it while I worked right next to her. We talked and cuddled and I thought things would improve, and some aspects definitely did. My sister told me breaking up with her then comforting her would just lead me back into the cycle and hurt her too. And I thought through all the stories I had hidden from them and my friends of how she did me wrong, and I yelled at them that they were wrong, and I just slid down onto the ground, and wrote this message: you did not deserve to be raped. What he did was awful and it is never your fault. But, you went up to his room alone with him after you two spent however much of the day together. You made fun of me for how oblivious I was at the start, but even I would have caught that. You didn't tell him about me because you didn't want to ruin his opinion by being too complicated. You can say my boyfriend is worried about me without explaining our entire relationship. You could make it clear you were taken, but you didn't when you have actively complained to me about how men often only befriend women for sex. And again, none of that excuses rape and I am so sorry that happened to you. But that doesn't change that you cheated on me, not physically but emotionally. My family doesn't know so many of the other cheating adjacent things either. And so many friends are telling me the exact same thing. When you called me I melted at your voice and forgot it all. But our relationship died when you walked into that room. It should have died when you refused full exclusivity, and it should have died when you kissed that guy on our break. If I go over there now I will be betraying my sister, and other relatives, when I promised so many times I wouldn't leave her again. And besides, there's nothing I as your ex can possibly do to genuinely support you right now, especially with how shattered my trust is. I'm sorry I made a promise to you I couldn't keep. Update 1. I thought that was a lot when it happened, but shit went insane afterwards. So, I ended up spending the day with family, and that night, I went to my cousin's grandmother's 79th birthday. She and her husband were basically surrogate grandparents to me. That section of the family was always close, so they were almost grandparents to me. Her husband threw this massive party, seemingly out of nowhere. That was the night I wrote the original post. 2 days later, his heart stopped. I was already a mess, between trying to process what happened with my ex, wanting answers and closure, and also dealing with a flat tire. Then he was in the hospital with guaranteed brain damage, and then he was dead. I basically collapsed the first week after the post, skipping all my university classes, and only going to work. I attended his vigil every night after he was taken off life support at the end of the week. He was brain dead, but my family wanted to keep him alive until relatives from out of town could get back. During this time, my ex got around my block, messaging me on Steam, which I forgot to block her on. She said she just wanted to tell me the full story, and recounted her story of the rape in extreme detail. She explicitly avoided telling me any information about the affair, lest I discover who it was. However, in telling me that, I was able to piece together who it was. A guy she had been in the talking phase with when we were talking to, who told her he had no interest in being friends when she chose me. Months before this incident, she had called a break, went on a date and kissed him. I should have left her then, but through guilt and promises, and what I later learned was a trauma bond built through abuse, I took her back. She swore to block him and yada yada, but I wanted answers, and I was feeling so completely dead trying to process everything. I let her convince me to talk in person under the guise of closure. She cried, and begged, and promised and pleaded. I sat there, Like a rock, for hours, tried walking out several times, but she withheld information, while dripping it to me just quickly enough to make it feel like progress. Over the next week, I uncovered the story. She had been seeing him in secret for the month before. She claimed it was all platonic. She put incredibly effort into seeing him. She talked shit about me too. But what really gets me is that she took the train into my city, where he lived too, greeted him at the station, never wanted me to pick her up from her city anymore, 80 miles away, then shamed me for never picking her up, and painting herself as sacrificing for me by taking the train. When she was meeting her affair at the station. I worked when the train pulled in. It was her spring break, so she was back in town for a week. She love-bombed me for that whole time, presented herself as a safe harbor in the emotional storm she caused. I was 3 weeks behind on my classwork by then, and I was only able to be productive around her, so I stayed there to stay afloat, falling into her hoover. But, then I saw her promises be broken, I saw the mask begin to slip, and I started collecting my stuff so she could not keep it hostage. I began mentally preparing to leave. Then the emotional abuse started again, the devaluation, the gaslighting, but I tried a few times to present myself, only to be emotionally attacked for a week. Then she realized I was leaving, and it flipped into gaslighting, claims of loyalty and love. I remember sending this when she claimed I was presuming to know her mind by saying she didn't love me nor was loyal to me. I'm not a mind reader, but if your brand of loyalty involves betrayal and cheating repeatedly, I don't want that loyalty. I ended up aggregating every letter I never sent her into a 43-page document. I read through it all, and I did what she never could. I listened to my younger self, I felt his pain, I became the person he had needed for 7 months, someone who could truly listen. I supported him, I proved to myself that I could love myself, and that I was enough. That was what gave me closure, myself, not her. Closure never comes from another person, only from you. Then I cut contact, more thoroughly that time. NC will be a month in 3 days. She tried contacting me by using my phone number at CVS to send me a receipt, adding my own chess. Calm and reacting to my Duolingo streak, but I just kept going. It was hard at first, but I got myself into therapy, where I started at medium depression, but have been cleared completely, started attending Codependence Anonymous meetings, reconnected with friends and family better than I ever had before in my life. I also realized that I was likely dealing with someone with comorbid BPD and NPD, especially since she would explicitly revoke her empathy and love at times, among many other things you can read by going through my post and comment history. But, she's not important anymore. What matters is that I took all that energy and love I had given her and put it into myself, and I'm now doing better than I ever have been. I'm on top of myself, and I'm busy, but I'm loving it. I went from a 78 on my math exam at the beginning of NC, to a 106.5 a few days ago. I barely think of my ex anymore, and while I'm not looking for romance, someone approached me the other day, and I had an amazing time with her then, so I'm open to see where things go. Apart from that, my sister's wedding is in 2 weeks, I've been incredibly busy illustrating for that, drew for 8 hours today, my finals are at the same time, and I'm also pursuing a Microsoft contract. So life is amazing, but exhausting. I'm driving out to the desert with my friend tomorrow though, and he's going to introduce me to a bunch of motor and water sports, so I'm honestly really excited, plus I'm getting a ton of friends together on Sunday to meet up after a while. Update 2. I really thought I'd outpace the craziness. Turns out, that was naive. If the last few weeks felt like new beginnings, this past fortnight ripped open every old wound, just to see what colors spilled out. I'm not writing for pity, frankly, I'm tired of pity, but in the strangeness of recent events, I feel the need to set it all down for myself here. So, after my last update, I was riding high. My friend and I took off for that desert trip. His idea of a vacation involved pre-dawn wake-ups and the sort of horsepower that makes your jaws rattle. But honestly, roaring out into empty wilderness made me feel more alive than I had in months. By noon, after getting half mummified in sunscreen, I'd conquered my first quad ride, only one near crash, which I'm taking as a win. The water sports came later, and I learned 2 things fast. 1, wakeboards don't care about your dignity, and 2, falling into river water at 30 miles an hour hits just as hard as heartbreak, but the bruises fade quicker. I mention all this because I felt, finally, like I was moving forward, right? But the universe, or whatever you want to call it, has a wicked sense of timing. It started with a phone call, of course it did. A number I didn't recognize, late at night. I almost let it go to voicemail, but on a hunch, I picked up. It was her mother. She started out polite, almost friendly, but it became clear she'd tracked me down because my ex had told her just enough about what happened, portraying herself as a pure victim of the world's cruelty. Honestly, she seemed mostly concerned that I not pile onto her daughter's guilt. I wasn't sure what I could possibly add, but she pressed. She says you're refusing to forgive her. She's not sleeping. She's failing classes. I did my best to be compassionate but firm, explained I wished her daughter nothing but healing, but that we were no longer in contact. She persisted, eventually asking if I would come to their house. The same house where, ironically, my ex used to sneak out from to see that guy. I politely declined. I'll be honest, after the call, I felt oddly unsettled, like this chapter wasn't as closed as I'd hoped. The next few days were a blur, finishing my illustrations for my sister's wedding, which was rapidly approaching, prepping for finals, and prepping for my first big pitch at Microsoft. I was genuinely stretched thin, but it all felt like a tidal wave of good stress, until the night of my sister's rehearsal dinner. That's when I got an anonymous Instagram DM. No profile pic, 1 follower. You think you know what really happened? It read. Ask around. She told people you forced her into things. My stomach dropped. I remembered all the gaslighting, the manipulation, how she could twist facts with an unsettling ease. I didn't respond, of course, but it was tough to ignore. The next day, another message. You're not the golden boy you think you are. A lot of people know. It honestly made me sick. The paranoia crept back in, just as everything else in my life was going smoother than it had in years. At the wedding, I kept catching my reflection and thinking I looked tired, strained in every photo. But the ceremony was beautiful, my sister looked radiant, and for a few hours, I let everything else drift away. Then, of course, she tried to show up at the reception. She didn't make it past the lobby. My aunt caught her, all credit to my family's overpreparedness and suspicious minds. My ex left a note. Sorry. Needed to see you. Please, I'm begging. I wanted to crumble, to let the floor swallow me just for a moment, because I realized she wasn't done pulling at the strings. Instead, I danced, badly, hugged my family, and reminded myself, over and over, you're here now, you got through it. But when I got home later that night, I did check my phone history. My ex had made over 20 calls during the reception. The last voicemail, just heavy breathing, then a single whispered I'm sorry. For the first time since our final break, I had nightmares again. About being not believed, about everyone buying her version. I woke up at 4 a.m. and started writing a letter, to myself this time, not her. I wrote everything I knew was true about what happened. I reread parts of that 43-page document just to be certain. I even reached out to some mutual friends, carefully, just to ask them what they'd actually heard. Apparently, she's been telling half-truths everywhere, that I abandoned her after her trauma, that I controlled who she could see. No one seemed to believe her fully, but enough doubt had been sown to make me queasy. But here's the wild thing, it didn't break me. Instead, something kind of snapped into place. I booked an appointment with my therapist, showed her the screenshots, played the voicemails. We talked for hours about control, about letting go of narratives I can't manage. She told me something I still turn over in my head. Abusers rarely want the relationship, they want the story. If you don't give them a new chapter, eventually, they go somewhere else. That weekend, I went to the beach with some friends who had no connection to any of this. New friends, new circles, nobody who knew my ex or cared who she was. I spent the evening making a bonfire, laughing into the smoke, watching embers blow and realizing how long it had been since I felt just okay. It sounds corny, but I actually watched the sunrise, lying between 2 friends who'd fallen asleep in the sand, and decided I would stop letting her inside my head. I blocked her new numbers, sent a message, just this once, to her mother, saying I deeply hoped her daughter recovered, but I would not be involved, now or ever. I deleted the document, and I archived everything else. I started saying yes to every invitation. My friend group started hosting weekly board game nights, and for the first time in years I actually started winning Ticket to Ride. A few days ago, the girl I'd met before the desert trip messaged me again. She wanted to show me her favorite hidden cafe. We met, we talked, and for the first 2 hours, I didn't think about my ex, or the note, or the DMs. Not once. So, this is all to say, I expected drama, and I got it, but it didn't destroy me. It's weirdly freeing, once you survive the worst, to realize you can keep moving, even if someone else is sprinting after you with buckets of old paint, trying to mark your every step. At the end of the day, you still choose which direction to run. If you're reading this wondering if you ever get past the spiral, here's the update I wish someone had written for me. It's not about finally being done with someone toxic. It's about rewriting the story so they're just an odd footnote. And eventually, you get to turn the page. Update 3. If you'd asked me 2 weeks ago, I'd have told you I was finally reaching some kind of emotional summit. My days became routines, good ones. I biked at sunrise, hit meetings, sketched for longer than I ever thought I could sit still. Even my inbox, for the first time since this all began, was quiet. And then, because apparently the universe doubles as a cosmic sitcom writer, things went from silence to absolutely unhinged. First, it was a package, not in my name, but to my address, which technically even my ex shouldn't have. It was small, wrapped in a childish sort of way, as if someone had taken care to make it look cute. Inside, a plush toy goose. If you've read the old posts, you'll know, a tiny notebook with the first page ripped out, and 2 pink post-it notes. You inspired me. Don't hate me forever. There was a smear of lipstick, and I'm not proud to say I checked the scent, just to confirm it was hers. I won't lie, I locked the thing in a box and slid it under my bed, where it still sits, mostly because tossing it felt like giving the drama more power than it deserved. After that, the truly bizarre began. I thought blocking her numbers and socials would be enough, but her proxies got creative. For about 4 days straight, friends started mentioning mutual acquaintances who'd had weird conversations with my ex. 2 were approached in person at cafes I frequent. 1, my oldest friend from high school, got a panicked late night call, my ex crying, supposedly terrified about what I'd do next. My friend texted me, basically, "Dude, what is this?" I told him the truth, which wasn't all that entertaining. I'm living my life and refusing to engage in insanity. Things escalated again a few nights later when, returning from a midnight walk, I spotted a figure across from my place. Not close, just there, staring towards my building. She was gone by the time I reached the corner, but there was an envelope tucked into the bush by the entryway. Inside were 2 pages, her handwriting, again, spilling everything out. Apologies, confusion, guilt. And then, weirdly, gratitude. There was a paragraph thanking me for showing her what a healthy relationship could look like and a request that I meet her, not to reunite, but because she needed to return something important. That line set off every warning bell. I'd seen this move before, the mix of regret, flattery, and a reason to break no contact. I showed my therapist the letter. She just asked, "How does it make you feel?" And honestly? Tired. Deeply, deeply tired. But I realized something as I tried to explain. Every loop she tried to make around me was getting thinner, weaker. It felt less like a chokehold and more like static. I declined the invitation. Instead, I sent a message to my immediate circle. If she contacts you, please don't engage. If she says I need help, I don't. I set up 2-factor authentication everywhere. My friend said he'd had his public Instagram followed by a new, 1-post-a-month private account named healing_together394. The bio? One of those vague, cryptic quotes about forgiveness. So, I pivoted. Instead of running or locking down or analyzing, I just lived. And that's when real updates started. First, a professor I've been working with on a small grant invited me for coffee. It wasn't academic, just "I've seen the light back in you lately, glad you're back." I'd never thought I wore pain that plainly, but apparently you can glow when you're finally not leaking emotional battery fluid everywhere. The girl from the cafe? Things have, honestly, progressed in a way I didn't expect. 3 weeks in, it's not fireworks and slow-motion movie scenes, it's easy. We went to a nighttime open mic, and when she noticed me freeze up during a song that reminded me of my ex, she just reached over and squeezed my hand. No questions, no pressure. I told her, in the car afterwards, that I appreciated that. She smiled and said, "I think everyone deserves their privacy about their pain. But when you want to share, you can." That was all. And here's where things veered from messy breakup territory into maybe this is how healing actually happens. I found myself laughing, deeply, at stuff that had nothing to do with my ex. I realized I was actually learning to say no without guilt, and yes without fear. She texted less and never tried to intrude. She met my friends for board games, gelled with them instantly, and, this was my favorite, absolutely creamed everyone at Codenames. My friends joked afterwards, "If she's evil, at least she's strategic, that's growth, man." But the last week went straight out of the movie playbook. Apparently my ex, stymied by everyone's refusal to play ball, finally tried to apologize publicly. She sent a message to the group chat for our old college club, a full-blown, multi-paragraph manifesto about learning from mistakes, hurting people you love under stress and trauma, and deciding to move forward by letting the past rest. Somehow, it struck the exact wrong chord. People, who'd stayed diplomatically neutral for months, began messaging me, some apologizing for doubting me, others asking how they should respond. Most said the post made them more uncomfortable than anything else. The club admin deleted the message, and then, in a twist I still don't fully understand, issued a gentle warning about boundaries and unsolicited apologies. I didn't gloat. I just walked to the lake near my place that night and felt lighter than I have in a year. Closure, it turns out, isn't a clean line you step over. It's 100 ragged little boundaries you enforce and reinforce until you barely remember why you needed them. My life now feels less about protecting myself from her, and more about investing in everything else. I'm taking a certifying exam for that Microsoft contract next week, and my sister's honeymoon photos just came in. She looks happier than I've ever seen her. And me? I still have the plush goose in a box, as a weird monument to getting past the weirdest era in my life. Sometimes, when I look at it, I just think, thank God for endings. I'm writing again. I'm drawing for myself again. On most days, I just feel, dare I say it, at peace. Update 4. About 6 weeks ago, I was finishing my chunk of the Microsoft contract. I passed the certification, by the way, 131/140. Yes, this is a humble brag, and prepping for an art portfolio review. My girlfriend, the cafe one, who I'll call Mia, had become a regular presence. We weren't rushing, just stacking up good days, and that was more than enough. The drama had shrunk to a footnote. Then, mid-May, came the career bombshell. My professor mentor dropped out of a huge joint grant at the last minute, health reasons, all good, just wild timing. His stepping down shifted all our workload. Suddenly, I was the contact for vendors, the point person for IT, the person everyone complained to about slow lunch reimbursements and DocuSign logins. It pushed me back into exactly the sort of high-octane stress I'd used all year to keep my mind off the breakup drama. Except this time, instead of hiding in work, I started showing up differently. Real boundaries. I told my collaborators no when I meant it, something old me absolutely wouldn't have done. Still, there were weird ripples. One night, after a sprint of back-to-back late meetings, I came outside and found a water bottle taped to the driver's side mirror of my car. No note, no hints, just a name written in Sharpie across the label, the name of my ex's dog. Creepy cute wasn't really my genre at this point, but it was unmistakably her style. My first thought was exhaustion, not fear. I peeled off the bottle, put it in my trunk, and, here was the revelation, told 3 friends and Mia about it instead of keeping it inside to fester. I actually let people in. 3 of them said, "That's just cartoonish," and we joked about what other weird objects she'd send. Next. Guesses included a rubber duck, a single sock, and an apology carved into a potato. Nothing else materialized, but the potato idea lives rent-free in my group chat now as an inside joke. 2 weeks later, right as things started feeling boring in a good way again, I got a letter. Like, a literal handwritten letter, postmarked from an out-of-state address, her aunt's, apparently. I only realized it was from her after opening it and reading 5 lines of disjointed apologies, then a veer into how her therapist asked her to write the letter for closure. Key line, "I am not asking for forgiveness, I know that's not fair. I want you to know I'm in a support group now, really working on myself." There was a drawing, goose again, this time with crutches, I kid you not. I didn't respond, didn't even show it to anyone except my therapist, who, after a long silence, sighed and said, "Sometimes people are addicted to their own narrative of regret." The kicker, later that week, I ran into her, yes, her, at a new ramen spot. Total accident. I saw her first, hair color changed, hands shaking as she picked up her takeout. I almost turned to leave, but she spotted me. The air went stone heavy. She came over, and honestly, for a second she looked normal. Like a tired, stressed out college student, not the chaos engine she'd been last year. Here's where it tumbled surprisingly off script. She didn't cry, or demand closure or forgiveness, or even apologize, not directly. She just said, "You look well. You really do." I said, "Thank you." She said she was moving back home and had started a semester late, taking a gap to sort things out. There was a pause, then she said, "You were the only person who ever believed I could be better. I'm sorry for making it impossible to be around me." Then she stood there, waiting, but I just nodded. Then, before leaving, she smiled, genuinely, for what it's worth, and said, "Really, I hope you're happy." And that was it. She left with her ramen and didn't look back. I got home and didn't feel shaky. Didn't even feel angry or triumphant. I just felt relieved and very tired, like someone had finally set down a suitcase they'd been carrying up invisible stairs. The rest of the week almost glowed with boring happiness. Mia and I went to a food truck festival and got comically sticky from honey chicken skewers. I aced the feedback for our big grant demo. My friends, emboldened by the creepy objects saga, started leaving jokey objects on my desk: an origami beer can, a Lego goose, a hand-drawn certificate of surviving wild drama, signed by everyone, in crayon. Even my family relaxed. At my dad's birthday dinner, for the first time they didn't even ask about all that stuff last year. I realized my life had finally become about things not related to her. So here's where the story stands. The saga of my ex, my recovery, and her many proxies seems to have officially entered the benign aftershock stage. I don't know if she'll ever actually stop, if she'll send more notes, turn up with cryptic Instagram bios, or retroactively try to rewrite our old story. But I do know the impact is gone. Even when the past knocks, it has no room left to move in. For anyone who's still reading because you're in the thick of something similar, here's a weird, honest truth. Sometimes the real end isn't a confrontation, or a blow-up, or even perfect catharsis. Sometimes, the final update is you living well enough that your past becomes not just a footnote, but a story someone else tells about their old life. My old life is over. I'm in the new one now. And I'll keep the Lego goose and the certificate of surviving drama nailed to my wall, just in case I ever need a reminder that yes, it really, actually, does get better.